Things haven't changed all that much since you folks were here, and that's kind of something that we're very proud of. We did some major renovations, interim renovations to the cabins, 10 years ago. We ripped out all the plumbing and so forth, but we intentionally tried to leave things as close as possible to where they were when you folks were here. And I tell them, this is the center of Shady Trails, right here, the lodge. A farmer was putting out poison to kill possums.
Aww.
Killed possum, the fox ate one of the possums and died. We have foxes here at the camp. 99% of it's digital photography, and we do image manipulations and things like that. We just teach kids to go out and have fun taking pictures. The archive. After 2 or 3 days of running hard at camp, they just want a little time off. And so they'll come in here and they'll plop down and they'll read a book. Well, the camp's open for a month. Some kids come for 1 week, some come for the whole month.
But they go home at night.
They go home at night. Right. But yeah, we were very strict on that. No electronics. Yeah. And actually, there were 3 episodes of Home Improvement filmed here.
Right.
You can go on YouTube and you actually can see it.
Oh, the future of the camp is, it's going to be a day camp. We're going to just continue as we are.
Oh, great. Okay, we had heard...
Don't believe any rumors. But one thing that we wanted to try to do was maintain the original character of the buildings. And one thing I'm really proud of, as simple as it is, these little drinking fountains. These were from World War I, and as you folks probably know, Clancy was big on Army-Navy surplus. All the bunks were Army-Navy surplus. All the wool blankets, we still have a bunch of the little gray wool blankets. So these are irreplaceable. They were a mess. They didn't work. Everything was just a mess in them. Got a hold of the company and they said, oh, we don't make anything for those anymore. But let me send you a catalog of our newer fountains and maybe. So anyway, Plummer and I sat down and we looked at some of these schematics for some of the newer fountains, and we thought, my gosh, we think we got one. And so we ordered this unit, and it fit right in perfect, just a couple little minor adjustments. Took the fountains down to Traverse City, had them powder coated, put the new valve system in, and voila.
They're from 1917, you said last time, right?
Yeah.
1917.
1917, 1918, 1919. Yeah. They made thousands of them that were shipped over to Europe in World War I. And they
What
were...
they use in Europe? What did they use? Were they put to the battlefield or something?
in where the troops were stationed.
Okay.
Yeah. Here's something else that we preserved. These benches.
Yes, original benches. That's amazing.
They were a mess. They were just a mess. And I think there were bits and pieces of about 22 benches. And I managed to use what we could, what wasn't broken. And I think we came up with 3, 6, 12, probably 14 or 15 very functional benches that use the same hardware that they were originally. Yeah, they can buff stones, they can do leather work, Sculpey clay, all kinds of things.
Outfitted, wow.
They can do a lot.
So how many kids per adult when they're doing these crafts?
Maximum 12 kids and three counselors.
This was a U club?
Yeah. See, when I was a camper in the 50s and in 1960, these were college-age kids. They were. In fact, there was a guy from Pennsylvania who he was in college. He told his girlfriend that he was getting his master's in Michigan. He didn't want to tell her for the beach camp. So every time we went on a camp, he called on the payphone.
Yeah, it does. And there's more causes. Who made Tagamet? I forget.
That was part of the, remember when they did the pentathlon? Had the infusion of money, so you almost think maybe that's when they had the money to do it. But
At the end of the field, over in the north corner, we have an archery this time too. We have archery.
So how much weight will those things hold?
A Volkswagen. So they got to be at least 10 years old. And they have to be tall enough that they can reach up and hook themselves on.
You've really worked hard. Just walking on that path right now, I know how much work you've done.
It's
Cleared out. It's nicely wood chipped. And
it's a lot of fun.
labor of love.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Jack, I don't know if you have any interest, but Judy Custer, who's a professor at University of Wisconsin, went to the Bentley Library, University of Michigan, and got a copy of all the historical pictures. And she's got a PowerPoint presentation she's going to give. But you may have other things of all the previous pictures way back from the 1940s and 50s of the camp.
She also has a website. So. Yeah. Bob can tell you about it, right? Judy Custer's website.
Could I have your attention, please? We want to thank Jack and Laura Debo for allowing us to be here. And I've got a couple of certificates of appreciation here, and it says, Jack says, in the Clancy tradition, all former campers and staff of Shady Trails recognize the significant efforts of Jack for allowing the former campers and staff to hold the reunion of 2014. His cooperation with the planning team and his participation in the reunion is greatly appreciated.
Thank you very much.
And Laura, who is the camp owner, we thank Laura Debo for allowing the former campers and staff to hold the reunion. Her generous willingness to allow us to return to this magical place is truly appreciated by all.
Thank you very much. This is really nice. I appreciate this. You people are all part of the magic of Shady Trails. I tell my staff every year when I get new staff, this is a magic place. You take this big 26-acre pot and you throw in some good programming, you throw in a bunch of kids, and you throw in staff. You shake it up and the magic happens. And it's happened ever since 1932. Since 1932. Lives have been affected at this camp. And they continue to be affected today. We see it in our kids today. Not as dramatic as what I'm sure you folks have seen, but it's still affecting lives. And I want you all to know that regardless of that no trespassing sign up there at the top of the driveway, you're always welcome to Shady Trails. Always.
Thank you.
I found another artifact the other day that I may try to get out of there today and bring it over to the lodge. Were any of you guys ever cavemen here? Yeah.
Double cave.
Really?
caveman.
What's your memories on here?
Big log. That log's probably this long, that wide, that high. Cavemen carved into it.
Yeah, I remember that.
All that
That's light. I thought it was big, long.
I thought it was gonna be real heavy, but it's not too bad.
One guy could carry it.
All right, good.
Original log over there.
Yeah, that was the original, what does it say, 1950?
Oh, is there a date on it?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
right here.
1950.
Wow.
I remember this log over the fireplace.
Wow.
Yeah. It was always,
Okay, but that's the third cabin out that way.
No. I'm not sure what. Maybe there was a visitor that day. I'm told that there was a special song anytime there was a visitor, you all sang. Explaining a camera. Another lesson? The beach.
My name is David Field. I am from Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was on the camp staff from 1964 to 1973 as an intern in the Neophyte Cabin, a major in the Wolverines in the Cave, assistant director, and director from 1970 to 1973. That's an announcement. Today, I was fortunate enough to be here for Mr. Clancy's last year at camp. The impact that camp and Mr. Clancy had on me and my life cannot be fully described in this very brief, hopefully, round robin. At the end of my summer, my freshman year here at camp, I heard that Mr. Clancy had wrap-up meetings with everyone on the staff. During those meetings, I heard that it was when Mr. Clancy invited you back, if. So, I wanted to be on the staff more desperately than I had wanted to be wanted anything in my life at that point. Some of the counselors and interns had already had their meetings, and only a few of them were invited back. So I went into my interview with Mr. Clancy with much trepidation and many heart palpitations. Mr. Clancy and I joked about many things that happened that summer. We had gone out to dinner together as a camp staff to the country club, and he and I had taken huge helpings of corned beef. And we sat down to eat our corned beef, and Grace Clancy turned to me and said, "Oh, John's finally found someone who likes ox tongue as much as he does." I choked it down. We also went on and we talked about what I had learned at camp and what my plans for the future were. He had challenged me early in the summer when he came out to the patio and saw me drinking my coffee, which looked more like cocoa than coffee because I used to put tons of sugar and cream in it. He challenged me to drink it black all summer with the promise that I would never go back to it. Never go back. I would drink black coffee for the rest of my life. So at some point in the interview, he excused himself. When he came back, he had a tray. On the tray were 2 cups of coffee, a sugar bowl, and a pitcher of cream. He set the tray down in front of me, took his cup, walked around the other side of the desk, and sat down. After a few minutes of my staring at the cup, he said, "Well, first I didn't want to disappoint this man who had become my idol. I thought I'd just choke the black coffee down and make him happy. Tell him that I'd learned to love it. But then I thought no, and shoveled a spoonful of sugar or two into the cup, followed by glugs of cream, raised the cup and said, "Sorry," and took a sip. Mr. Clancy laughed loudly and then said, "Well, Mr. Field, it looks like you'll have to come back to Shady Trails a few more summers to learn how to take it black." And that's how I got my invitation to return. And later that day, I went into the kitchen, and Ruthie came up to me, and she said something like, "Talk to John. He said you were the first coffee challenge failure he's had in a long time." Evidently, he challenged somebody every year to do this. And I said, "Oh gosh, was he upset?" She replied, "Hell no. He likes it when someone stands his ground." And I've often wondered since then, would I have gotten an invitation to come back if I had just drunk the coffee black? John Clancy was born in Traverse City. At age 4, John used to ride with the milkman on his routes. He enjoyed being with this guy, and for some reason his parents let him do this. One day the milkman stopped the truck to pick him up, and he was a little slow in getting off. And the milkman yelled actually, "Hurry up, you little stuttering son of a bitch." At that point, John realized that he was a stutterer. His stuttering plagued him all through his school years and during his time at Notre Dame. I wonder if he ever became a true Blue fan, having graduated from Notre Dame. It troubled him all through his job as an accountant. And finally, after years of trying to overcome the problem, trying many, many different methods, he discovered the keys to overcoming stuttering for him. He felt they lay in becoming self-confident and understanding that stuttering doesn't define who you are. It doesn't determine who you are, what you were, or what you wanted to be. He wanted to help others understand these principles. So he came upon the idea of building a setting where those who stuttered could get away from the environments that were reinforcing the negative perceptions of oneself and learn the principles that he had learned. And that would be a way to open the door to fluent speech. In 1932, Clancy opened Shady Trails with that philosophy on a site that we've talked about and sent pictures of just north of here. Over the years, that site has been used as a camp for girls called Indian Beach, which our boys desperately wanted to get back to. Timber Shores, an RV resort, and now, as I understand it, that area is being slated for development as a subdivision. The first year of camp, there were 4 campers at Shady Trails in 1932. The second year, there were 6, and then there were 15. All the activities took place in and around an old hotel and several cabins. The program grew steadily, and after 15 years, the camp had burst at the seams. It was outgrown its capacity. So Mr. Clancy put everything he owned and bought this property and the buildings and went about building a new camp. It opened in 1947. There were 84 campers from 23 states, and there were 34 staff members. 2 years went by, and Clancy was about to go under. He realized that he would not be able to go it alone. In order to grow and prosper, the camp needed a stable, regular source of financial and institutional support. Faculty from the University of Michigan had been involved with the camp for many years. It was a treasure trove of clinical experience for their students. So he turned that relationship, and through the Kresge Foundation, the camp was purchased and gifted to the university. Mr. Clancy was to remain as the director. He earned an MS degree in speech pathology from the University of Michigan. This was a stipulation by the University of Michigan of his retention as director. He was also appointed assistant director of the speech clinic at the university. The Camp Clancy philosophy is the backbone of Shady Trails. I can still remember my orientation when he stood up and said, "You will, for the summer, give up all personal prerogative for the good of this group." And he meant it. Most of us that sitting there before him had little idea what that meant, but we were soon to find out. For Clancy, it revolved around the campers. Everything revolved around the campers. Their achievement of the goals of self-confidence and improved self-image. His keys to overcoming speech problems. He expected the staff to adopt this same attitude. The staff had to understand and buy into this if they were to fully appreciate the opportunity that being at Shady Trails offered. If you did, you had a wonderful summer. If you did, you had a summer from hell. If you bought into it, you could hold up under the burden of being totally responsible for these kids who were entrusted to us by their parents 8 weeks, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For the director, and Dave Daly can probably attest to this, 168 hours a week you worried about these kids and what was going on in their lives and hoping that nothing happened. One time, when I was the director, Tim Carter came to me and said, "We can't find John Casper." I said, "What do you mean we can't find John Casper? It's bedtime, it's dark. Where is John Casper?" We got out every flashlight we could find. We looked high and low. We went up on the hill. The first place I sent people was down to the beach. We walked along the beach. We walked through the woods. I paced my office. What am I going to tell their parents? How could I lose a camper? What is going on here? I think it was it you, Mike? It was somebody that finally came to me and said, "We found John." I said, "Where was he?" At the bottom of his bunk. He had crawled down under the covers to sleep. It was chilly there. After I recovered from my shock, I made an edict that all counselors must check under the covers when they did bed check at night so we can make sure that all campers were in their place. The other thing that you have the speech staff had to come to understand is that they weren't done with therapy at the end of their therapy sessions. Therapy went on all day. They couldn't go back to their comfy little cots and rest. They had to go out and be with these kids during their evening activities, during meals. They were responsible for doing therapy, even when the kids didn't know that. That came as a shock to many of the young women and men that enrolled at the University of Michigan for their internship year. I know it was to me. The counselors learned that there was more to do than just play with kids. You were actually here to teach them something. You were actually here to support the goals of better speech, self-confidence, and growing as a person. If you did, if you adopted these goals, if you internalized that, there were several benefits. First of all, if you were a woman, you could stand living in the hen house with 20 other women in 2 bathrooms. Can you imagine that? 20 women, 2 bathrooms, 1 shower with 2 heads. And as Dave Daly shared with me earlier, they used to come in full makeup the first few days of the week. After that, they were lucky if they got to breakfast at all. If you bought into this, you could manage with a half day off each week and 1 night out. That night out began at 10 o'clock. Most of that time was spent at the laundry mat. No, it's not a laundromat. It was the laundry mat washing clothes. And then, if you still had any energy, you could go study at the library, watch the moonrise, whatever else you could find to do.
Yards at the Northport Hotel.
There were no excuses for being late for breakfast the next morning. If you did buy in this, you were possibly in for a life-changing experience and the satisfaction of knowing you had helped a lot of kids to a better life. And that if you were a camper and bought into this, you would have an experience that would totally change everything for you. The entire day at camp was designed to further Clancy's vision. Every waking hour, for the staff there were many of these and few of the other kind that we know as sleep. I remember once sitting on the patio with Ruth Curtis enjoying a cup of coffee. Ruth was the clinical supervisor the year that I was there. She was critiquing my therapy session, and Clancy came out and sat with us, which made me nervous enough as it was. She was giving me some things to work on. We had to write, keep clinical notes on one camper, describing everything he did from the time he got up in the morning till the time he went to bed at night, every time he burped, every time he the other thing, and every time he spoke and how he felt, how we thought he felt, and all of this. And I said, I just don't know if I have time to do that all. And Mr. Clancy smiled and said, well, what are you doing between midnight and 4 a.m.? And he meant it. He meant that. Because that's the way he ran his life, and he expected us to do that too. Everything that was done at this camp was done with one purpose. That is the success of the program and the life of the campers. Anything that interfered with that was not done. And if you knew Clancy, it wasn't even suggested. Mr. Clancy believed that the dining room was the heart of the camp program. Ruth Curtis, as I mentioned, was a longtime staff member, and she was on the staff from the old camp. She also worked for the University of Michigan. She and I became friends, which was sort of an odd friendship, but we became friends, and Katie, my wife, and I often visited her at her home in Grosse Pointe after I became director, and I relied on her heavily for advice. She told me a lot about how things at camp were developed. She said she had gone to Mr. Clancy and said, John, you have a golden opportunity here. Use the meal times as therapy. With her urging and help, Clancy designed the dining room program. Campers and staff sat together like a family. For as much as we could, a man and a woman at each table, 4 to 6 campers. The goal was teaching the boys and young men manners and table etiquette. Ruth's idea was if they knew these things, they would be more comfortable in social situations. It also gave them the opportunity to engage in conversation and to put into practice the skills that they were using and learning in speech class. Table groupings were rotated so that campers were exposed to a wide variety of kids within the camp program. As an aside, we used to post on that wall over there the new table assignments, which came out every 2 weeks. When Curtis was on the staff, people ran to see if they were placed at her table. There were gasps of horror and moans of despair, because when you sat at Miss Curtis's table, you sat with Hitler himself. As sweet and nice as she was, is if you put an elbow on the table, you might lose the elbow. If you pass things to the right instead of the left, you might be banished from the table. And if you refuse to take 3 bites, don't even mention it. After the tables were cleared by our seagulls, Mr. Clancy would rise, and in his booming voice he would ask, "Are there any announcements?" Then one by one the campers would raise their hands and announce anything from their hometown, their name and their hometown, to the speech changes they were trying to achieve, or to the famous, "The water in the bay
is cold today."
Is cold today. How many times have we heard that announcement? Dr. Prince banned that announcement. If it was given once, he'd say, "Okay, that's it for the day. We all know the water in the bay is cold today. We will not have to hear that again." In some cases, there were revelations of embarrassment to certain of us on the staff. For example, today we went to Sleeping Bear, said the neophyte, and Mr. Field and Miss Mahalican were buried in the same hole. Or, from a PA that was sitting at my table, the third rotation through camp. Mr. Field is still in his pajamas. Well, to explain that, I was out on a out night and I got home rather late. In fact, it was probably about a half hour before the bell rang. I didn't hear the bell, the first bell. I heard the second bell, which meant you had to be in the dining room and ready to sit down. To save time, I ran in that door, and my table was over where Lance is sitting, and sat down, and I had Bermuda short pajamas or paisley, and I thought, well, nobody's going to notice this, because you didn't want to be late for breakfast with Clancy, because he might have you stand up and explain why. You better have a good reason for this, Joe. Could you tell the people here why you are late for breakfast? Or he might have you sing a song, or he might have you do something else to make sure that you never let this happen again. I had heard the bell, I decided to save time. I thought, yeah, you look like Bermuda shorts. Nobody's going to notice. But one little PA kid noticed. My all-time favorite announcement that reveals staff is, Mr. Field went to the barber today and he asked him why he had come. Announcements and round robins after the evening meal were devoted to overcoming the fear of speaking and demonstrating to the camp family what changes you were trying to make in your speech patterns during the summer. We also had weekly mifflers given by by the staff first and then a different cabin each week. These also demonstrated speech change. It gave the kids a chance to learn to cooperate with each other, and it was a chance to have a good time. The original miffler was done down in the old camp, and that's where the name Mifflin came from. It seems that they decided to put on a play. There happened to be one broom in the whole camp. For some reason, Clancy had one broom. And the name of the play was The Miffling Mystery of the Missing Broom. The name Miffling caught on, and from then on, the plays that were given every Saturday night became known as Mifflers. Mr. Voorhees, Mr. Carter, and I wrote a Miffler for this reunion, but unfortunately you're not going to see it. Maybe the next time you will be able to see it. The reenactment of the Miffling Mystery of the Missing Broom. As a child, Mr. Clancy's parents sent him to the Grove School in Detroit. He returned after a period of living there, and he was fluent. But he lost those gains shortly after he came home. He recognized that experiences that you received in a closed, supportive environment wouldn't necessarily lead to permanent change. So he recognized also that they needed to be carried over to the outside. So he built a program of trips out of camp where campers could test their newfound skills with those who may not be as sympathetic as those of us in the camp family. These trips afforded campers the opportunity to make speech contacts, to grow in confidence that they could go out from the camp and be successful. Another wonderful opportunity, much anticipated by the older men of the youth club, especially, and sometimes the cave, was a visit from Dr. Bloomer's sister, Marie Hartwig. Marie worked for Interlochen Academy for the Arts. Marie did not come alone. Marie came accompanied by girls.
You're here.
You're here. The youth clubbers and the cavemen were supposed to take groups of these young ladies on tours of the camp, explain to them what camp was all about, and invite them to sit with them at dinner. There was much competition for the 2 mirrors in those cabins, the showers, which sometimes hadn't been used for a while, and much eager anticipation of seeing the young ladies from Interlochen. We also used to take the kids from here to Interlochen and have them have tours of the camp given by the young ladies of Interlochen. The sports skills program was an integral part of the campers' day. You saw a little bit of it in the program that was presented, that Judy presented. The sports skills program was not just to, Clancy recognized that a healthy body was really important. He also recognized that it built self-confidence and a healthy self-image. But he also recognized that for young boys and young men, not being adept at sports could be a source of social pressure and embarrassment. So he wanted to build sports skills into these kids' lives so they could go away from here, go back to their homes, their schools, and feel more comfortable, more confident about themselves. Despite the hard work and the long hours, we did have fun here at Shady Trails. We had enough time, late night, to play tricks on each other. Mr. Carter liked to hide behind trees and jump out.
No.
And surprise people. One night, he jumped out and surprised Dr. Prince. You want to finish the story today? I don't know what you're talking about. We also had a time to make lasting friendships, sometimes those that have lasted a lifetime. We had a chance to be part of something that was more important than ourselves. And for many of us, it was a life-changing experience. Dr. Prince was on the staff from 1960 to 1969. He followed Clancy as director. Dave, of all of us, probably knew him best. Of all of us here tonight, probably knew him best. Here's some of what he wrote about Clancy in his book, Going Home. Camp is a large family, mainly of new members, assembled overnight. All those personalities, all those needs and wants, all those aspirations thrown together. In the blink of an eye, it could bring out the best or the worst in people. How would it work? How could it work? Clancy knew. He was the father. I promised myself I wouldn't do this. He was the father, all 5'6" of him, and he ruled like a benevolent monarch. Clancy did it, and this is important. He did it with goodwill, good judgment, good humor. Clancy loved to laugh. He liked people, found merit when there was merit to be found. He was direct, practiced the art of plain talk. He was fair, knew better than to play favorites. He accepted bad news, didn't shoot the messenger. He used his temper, didn't lose it. Clancy was, as Dean Acheson said of Truman, free of the greatest vice in a leader. His ego never came between him and his job. Clancy trusted his instincts too. In emergencies, as well in day-to-day, his responses were quick and correct. He didn't need to consult program notes or a script. The blueprint was in his mind. It was amazing to watch. By the early 60s, Clancy and his wife Grace, who had served as camp mother since the inception, were both in poor health. They retired after the 1964 camp season, and David Prinz was named director. He served for 5 years following Mr. Clancy. He ran the camp in the spirit of its founder. I was on the staff under his direction all those years, and I was amazed at how he was able to keep the spirit of Shady Trails intact. For me, it seemed as if Clancy was still among us. Toward the middle of the summer of 1969, Dave called me into his office and told me of his decision to retire at the end of the season. It came as a shock. I had no indication that he was even thinking of doing that. I asked him who was to be the next director. He smiled and said he had recommended me to Dr. Bloomer, the head of the U of M speech company. I was overwhelmed. I told him I didn't think I could do it. Then he said, he had gone to see Mr. Clancy before the camp had started, just a few weeks before he passed away. Dave said they discussed who should follow him as director. Dave said he told him that he had recommended me. Clancy told Dave, good choice. And so I somehow became director of the camp. I was humbled and honored to have followed Dave Prince as director in Clancy's Shady Trails. To carry on the Clancy tradition, it was not always easy. I was young, only in my 20s. I didn't have my PhD. In the absence of Prince and Clancy, pressure from the university to make changes was heavy and always persistent. While some of the changes that were suggested were reasonable and we instituted them, I did my best to preserve Clancy's vision that all things were done for the benefit of the campers and nothing was done to deter from that. I was always asking myself, as Dave Prince advised me, what would Clancy do? Mr. Clancy had established self-sacrifice as the bedrock of the camp's welfare. Personal and family life came second. Clancy had always done it that way. Both Dave and I followed in those footsteps. Both of us had come to believe that it was the crucial element that made camp a success. But my family was growing and growing and growing. It became harder for Kate and the kids to give up our home in Ann Arbor for the summer from Memorial Day to Labor Day. Despite the idyllic life of a cottage on Grand Traverse Bay, we began to consider that maybe we should make some changes. While at camps, Kate served as the camp mother, but she bore the brunt of caring for the kids, as Clancy and Prince before me. For we were the fathers of the campers and the staff, rather than our own children. In communications with Dave Prince, I voiced my concern and that I would be disappointing both him and Mr. Clancy if I were to leave camp. He told me his resigning his position was based on similar concerns. Dave assured me that he understood my decision. He told me that he dreaded telling Mr. Clancy, but Mr. Clancy had accepted his decision graciously. Dave assured me he did as well. With my departure from Shady Trails, the direct line of succession from John Clancy was at an end. The direction that the camp would take after that, only history would tell.
The famous story of your almost burning down.
Well,
would you be so kind?
Sure. I was an intern. I was tired. I stayed home one out day to keep up my blasted journal on whatever kid it was that I was following, to make lesson plans, to run off on a little mimeograph machine of little lesson plans she had put in the notebook. It was a rainy day, just like it was this morning. I decided to build a fire. So I built this huge fire in the fireplace in the DFI cabin. I became sleepy. I decided I'd rest for a while. So I went and laid down on the bunk. I smelled smoke. I came out to find the flames of the fire licking the front of the fireplace and the board on the mantelpiece ablaze. So, first thing I thought of was, Clancy's going to kill me. I'm burned out in the DFI cabin. So I knocked the board off the mantle. It wasn't attached, and I stomped on it. I got this little cup out of the bathroom, poured as much water on it as I could, and I did put it out. I didn't know what to do after that. After all, they were bound to notice a charred board. So I did. I went and told Mr. Clancy there'd been an incident in the cabin, and I had built a fire that was too big, and he said, "And you burned down the mantle." I said, "Oh, yeah." He said, "Don't worry about it." And that was the end of that story.
Somebody else was done than before.
What?
Somebody else.
Evidently, somebody else had done something similar. Our next speaker is going to be Joanne Pearson, who's going to talk about the final days of Shady Trails.
So I was first an intern in Shady Trails in 1983 while I was doing my master's in the program in speech language pathology. I was dating my not husband at the time, so he has been affiliated with this camp that long. I got the bug. You know, you come here, and as you all know, you get the bug or you don't. Some do not. And I got the bug and returned the next summer as a research assistant. And so that was 83 and 84. And then we got married in 85, and I took a public school position. And I will fast forward, in 92, camp had been without a director. It was after David, what was his name? Gary, and then after Gary. Gary was here in the 80s, and then I think it was Dr. Tate, and he was suffering some health issues, and they hired someone, I think, from the nursing school to run the camp. Well, we came here and it was a debacle. All of the traditions were gone. The grounds were a mess. It just had not been maintained. And now, at this point in my life, and after they closed camp, I really believe that I was meant to bring John Clancy back. Because Joe will tell you, I was probably the female incarnate of John Clancy. I ran the lodge a certain way. You didn't miss a meal. You better be out on that patio when I rang the bell in the morning to call you to breakfast, and I met all of the campers out there every morning. I one time made a model of Joe, apparently, he was telling me, where they went out and apparently had not put on sunscreen, and I did a little lesson with, this is what happens when you don't wear sunscreen, and showed their sunburned selves. So a lot of John Clancy came back. So to prepare for this, I sent a Facebook post out to my people, many of them I still call my kids, and said, I'm going to be talking about the end of camp. Send me your memories. So they sent those memories, and on the way up here today, which is sort of how I operate, I wrote this piece. And then I'm happy to answer any other specific questions you have, but my husband helped. I think we captured the essence of when we were here and when we closed. We were the ones who closed the camp, literally came up here after the Regions closed it in March of '95, and we came up that summer and cleaned things up and closed things down, literally, and it was a very, very hard thing to do. So, this is a story about Shady Trails, a camp where love and perseverance prevailed. It existed from 1932 to 94. I have a few stories, but there are many more. I got the call to lead in '91 after that disastrous season was all done. They had no mifflers, cabins were defaced, STC traditions had been replaced. I assembled a team, the leaders and the best. To get it all back, that would be our test. Jen and Mr. I, Susan and Mr. E, my husband as Mr. Fix-It, and we had Betty B. To hire the staff, we had a blank slate. To come join our team, you had to be great. Jen did the interviews, the questions were rigorous. We only hired those who were creative and vigorous. We arrived at camp June 1992. We could not believe what we had to do. The camp buildings were a neglected mess. Where we would begin was anybody's guess. John Vitolo sanded graffiti off the walls. Toilets and showers, Pete Pearson fixed them all. Facilities and program, all in great need. We had 1 week to get it up to speed. In came the staff, as green can be. They knew not one tradition of STC. You best be ready when the breakfast bell rings, and there will be lots and lots of songs to sing. Don't slam the doors, close them nice and slowly. You new people, you're a lowly. Stand by your chair, wait to say grace, then you can sit in your place. Napkin on your lap, pass to your left. Need to get up, don't be bereft. Ask the table head, may I please? Push in your chair when you leave. First meal is always baked beans and brown bread. Portending what's to come, some may dread. Extra food settled with a grand wang ho, and then to the happy hour staff would go. We had 1 week to teach the staff. Round robins and mifflers, they made us laugh. We had to get tough on about day 2, but not to worry, the staff pulled through. There were songs to learn, quite a few really, with toilet brush in hand led by Mr. Feely. The welcome song for every guest. Learning those songs put us to the test. These are our songs. Ram, Sam, Sam, the Grand Old Duke of Earl, the Three Bears song for every boy and girl. We had our favorites, you and me, the one about Joe and the Button Factory. The name game happened on day 3. I remember you, do you remember me? Cabin teams led by an SLP, improving communication was our creed. And then we were ready, yes, it was time, to trudge up the hill and erect the camp sign. Children's camp was 2 weeks, youth camp 3, fluency another one, yes sir. They arrived in yellow buses, some by car. Excited campers from near and far. Assigned to cabins, U Club Cave and Roost, Wolverines and Mariners and Little Park Avenues. Up every morning, 7 days a week. Speech therapy daily, our skills to tweak. Out trips on every Sunday and Wednesday into town to practice what we'd say. Picnics at Peterson Park, a trip to Sleeping Bear, around the peninsula, we go everywhere. Trips to the beaches, the ice cream store, Gwen Frostic's studio, and so much more. We thanked the Elks and planted some trees, walked with Jen to make discoveries. We dressed up crazy for the whole digging contest. We did all things cherries for the old Cherry Fest. We brought back old traditions and began some new Celtic Fest, Hawaiian Fest with Queen Kahuna too. We played a lot of games like Capture the Flag, and there was always opportunity to dress in drag. We had a lot of fun, but through it all, improving communication was our call. It didn't matter if you spoke or signed, the goal was to improve 1 step at a time. It wasn't without challenges, sometimes it was hard. We sometimes wished we'd stayed home in our own yard. But towards the end, we just couldn't believe that pretty soon we'd all have to leave. And as that time to leave grew near, campers and staff's eyes filled with tears. But campers had new skills in their packs, and everyone vowed, next year I'll be back. And they took home memories which to hold dear, dreaming of the firecracker watermelon cheer. Or that seagull, halfway through the season, flew across the dining hall for no reason. So many memories I can't recite them all, like the Royal Order of the Osprey with its very special call. Fish! 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 Arts and crafts and Indian Joe, to the large athletic field we would go. Marie Clancy Hagerman, daughter of John Clancy, visited us and was as proud could be, that we'd restored the traditions of STC and we'd all made DBS&D. To everything there is a season. Why camp closed? There's no good reason. For those who loved it, it was a crime. It was the greatest place of all time. It was a place that captured the magic. That it closed really was tragic. To those who were there, it's really not strange. The countless lives the experience did change. Long-lasting friendships, a marriage or two, for me it changed me through and through. I thank Holly Craig for seeing in me the skills and knowledge and capacity to lead. I believe all things are meant to be. I'm grateful we were given the opportunity to restore the hallowed grounds of STC to the visions and traditions of John Clancy.
How did you find out about the closing of the camp? How was it delivered to you?
Well, I was working for Shady Trails still. I was coming back the next year as the director, and probably if it would still be going, I'd still be here. And Holly, we knew that Richard Brown, who had been a camper here in the 30s or 40s, was not reelected in November '94.
As what?
As a regent, I'm sorry. He was a regent at the University of Michigan for many years. He was from this area. He had been a camper at Shady Trails. He was not reelected, and so Shady Trails really had no champion anymore at the university. And in the March meeting, they closed it. And then at their April meeting, a number of my staff and former campers went and spoke to the regents about what they did. But of course, it was a done deal.
And then the other half of the question would be, what was their reason? Was it financial? I've heard stories that because there were now therapists available at most public schools, therefore there was no need. What was the reason they gave?
We got a lot of funding from Michigan Special Health Care Services funding. And a lot of the campers used that funding. That funding was drastically cut that year, and so that was part of it. Part of the reason was financial. Yeah.
When did the demographics of the camper population start to change? I know they were in co-ed sometime in the 70s.
Yeah. So I'm not sure exactly when that changed, but when
1976.
Okay, 76. There you go. Because when I was here in '83, we had boys and girls, and we had all kinds of kids relative to language disability, and so that's why we reinitiated the fluency camp, because the fluency camp needs the campers was very different than many of the other children who were here.
When did the deaf population?
Do you know that? When the deaf population, Jackie?
No, I started in '88, and they had been coming for a while.
I'm differentiating between the hard of hearing and deaf. The hard of hearing were here when I was here. Yeah. When did deaf population?
Well, I can tell you that they first started utilizing interpreters possibly in '86 or '85. There was an incident where they needed to go outside and need an interpreter. There was a fight or something, and they needed to call in an interpreter. And from that point on, they realized that maybe they needed some more communication through interpreting.
So that was, she's saying, 85. I was here '83 and '84, and we did not have interpreters.
I'm going to guess 85 or 86.
So no interpreters, no deaf.
Yeah, so
there were some deaf though, without interpreters at first.
yeah, so mid '80s, late '80s. Yeah.
We thank Joanne for her participation in the program today and her contribution to the planning team as a former camp director. She greatly appreciated.
What happened to all the memorabilia on the walls and everything? I've seen up, clean up, all the stuff that was on the walls?
A lot of it went to the Bentley, I thought.
The granddaughter of John Clancy happened to be visiting North Fork, and she told me that when they came down here just to see the camp, they discovered it was closed and that there were people here throwing memorabilia in dumpsters.
Oh, no. Orientation week and the first week of camp also had a plan. That plan involved making sure that everybody on the camp staff had empathy for what these campers were going to go through. So Clancy and the early staff, and Joanne mentioned it, instituted the elite group called the DBS&D. The DBS&D stands for the Doctors of the Brainless Surgery and the Drama. In order to become a doctor of the brainless surgery and the drama, you had to be on the camp staff. You had to present a pleasant epistle of utmost praise to one of the senior staff members, praising them themselves. You had to come to dinner, if you were a male staff member, with a perfect garland of daisies in your hair. If you were a female staff member, you had to wear a tie, correctly tied. You had to present to the director a card with 6 perfectly mounted specimens of mosquito. Very important. And more importantly, you had to give an announcement. You had to give announcements and you had to give a round robin, and you had to present a Miffler. The round robins were presented to the staff first. A panel of esteemed doctors would assemble in the staff office, and the people who were giving the round robins appeared in costume. They were given a topic, and they had to present this topic before the esteemed doctors, before they presented it here, in this very spot, next to whoever was the director, in costume. They had to write and produce a Miffler. At the end of the Miffler, they had to sing the song of the doctors of the brainless surgery. It was sung to the tune of the Manhattan Merry-Go-Round. Nobody knew it. Nobody had heard of it. It goes something like, we are the doctors of brainless surgery. We'll cure all your problems and do it free. We have a cure-all on which we rely for mumps and measles and even PI. And we are all the doctors of the drama. We will stage a panorama. And that's as much as I know. We're going to throw out the mail. Mr. Clancy had 32 years to learn how to throw letters out. Prince had 5, I had 5 or 4. I got pretty good at it. I've been practicing. I would have liked a little more weight in these. These are pretty light. So most of them may fall on the floor right in front of me. But we'll do the best we can. And maybe I'll get better as we go. The first letter goes to Mary Drumheller. The second one goes to Frank Polson. Next, Woody Fox.
Counselor. I was a counselor here like 66, 68, and 70. I worked under Dave Prince for 2 years as a counselor and for Dave Fielding in 1970. And the honor of being a camper under John Clancy in 63 and 64. So I'll tell you, in other words, over this weekend, it's been a tearjerker for me. To see what this camp has done, in other words, not only for me, but for everybody here in this room today. And Tom, today, on that video, on that black individual that was deaf, who came here for 9 years, and he said that it was the best thing of his life. It brought tears to my eyes. And I don't think people really realize what it is like to go through a life as a stutterer, or deaf, or cleft palate, or articulation. But when you have walked in those shoes, which all of us have, it's unbelievable what this camp has done for people since 1932. And I thank you, every one of you. And the 2 Bobs here today, and Dave, and Tim, and Howard, and Jim. I thank you, because it changed my life. I stuttered bad. I came here in 1963. I was a self-employed optometrist for 40 years, and I talked every day for probably about 10 hours a day. And I could have never done it. In other words, without Shady Trails. And I thank you. We were sailing all along. Come on, we need some noise.
I told you you'd be sorry for inventing that machine. And all the neighbors, cats and dogs will never more be seen. They'll all come down to sausages and find the next machine. One day I came, oh my darling Clementine, you are lost and gone forever, wreckful sorrow, Clementine. The waters! Hail to the came here and on with the Shady Trails welcome song. I thought it was a great tune. I thought, boy, that's really, whoever wrote that tune, and then, you know, the music and the words, it's just wonderful. And then, much to my shock and disappointment, years later, I went to the University of Michigan, and my freshman year, I went to the Ohio State football game, and here comes the Ohio State marching band playing the Shady Trails song. I realized, my Lord, it's the Ohio State fight song. Having had to endure the Ohio State fight song music, I think it's only fair that we sing number 7. Hail to the victors valiant, hail to the conquering heroes, hail, hail to Michigan, the champion.
I would almost like to do my first year as a Wolverine because I experienced something that year that I'd never experienced before. And that was such a interesting experience. When you have a birthday at Shady Trails, it's usually a special thing. And so I have a summer birthday, and so it was a special thing. And so, you know, after the camp dinner, it was, we all went back to the cabin, and it was announced that by my counselor at that time that we were going to have somebody special was going to have a swirly. And if no one has ever heard what a swirly is when you're having a birthday, they pick you up and carry you in the bathroom and put your head in the toilet and flush with water. So that was my experience of having a swirly, which was, you know, it was kind of a team building experience. They were building it on me, but it was great. You know, it was a great summer.
In 1973, my name was Mary Fineweaver, and I had graduated from Western, and I decided to pick up a lot of critical hours and get a jump start on my grad degree by coming to Camp Shady Trails. First day at Shady Trails, when they assigned the staff to cabins and to off days and whatever, Greg Keaton, Mr. Keaton, as we called each other, he was 20 years old, turning 21, and I was 21, turning 22. He was the counselor, I was the speech therapist, and so he was assigned to, I think he was assigned, or he's self-assigned, to show me around the camp and tell me about camp traditions. So I said, oh, I have a summer birthday. Oh, you do? Me too. When's yours? July. Oh, when's yours? Mine's July too. It was late at night. I think the moon was already out. We got our driver's licenses out, I think, to prove it to each other. We have the same birthday. So I kind of got scary right away, and I met my husband at Shady Trails. We've been married 39 years, 2 children, 3 and almost a half grandchildren. We used to come back here every year and at least go to Traverse City and drive up here and see the camp. Usually in the off season at sea. We were so sad when it closed, but that custodial person he's right. He will let you in. He did that to us on multiple occasions. It's always going to be incredibly near and dear to our hearts. It changed our lives forever. So that probably went over a minute, but
Our first date.
oh gosh, our first date was on the athletic field. On our birthday, which I think showed me how we had quite a bit of restraint to not. I mean, I had a boyfriend, he had a girlfriend, you know.
We threw frisbee on the athletic.
We threw frisbee on the athletic field. And we
I'm Bob Voorhees. I was first to camp here in 1959. I was one of the lucky ones who get to have the full dose of Mr. John and Clancy. I was a camper also in 1965. By the way, I was in the Boost in 59. I was a camper in 1965 in a cave with the illustrious Mr. Bert Weiner. And thanks to Mr. Field working with me when I was in college at U of M, my speech greatly improved, and me to be a counselor in 1970. So that's my quick history, and I think I've been set up by Mr. Phil because my topic doesn't have to do with the camp. You know, he's a dog lover. He knows I'm a dog lover, and this is titled "Yorkies, the Love of My Life." Well, of course, I have to defer. My family is first, but not for my family. I certainly love dogs. I don't know how many of you have dogs. When I say Yorkies, you can substitute your Great Dane or your Terrier or your whatever. Yes, your Beagle. Particularly his name Gracie. That's right. But,
this is classy.
yeah, Yorkies, as you know, and dogs are wonderful things. And for example, there's a common expression that if you want a friend in Washington, D.C., just get a dog. That's about the only way you'll find one. Dogs are loyal and dogs are wonderful, and I miss mine. I've only been gone for him a day or so, and I know when I get back, he'll treat me like I'm his long-lost friend, and they're wonderful.
When I was at my occupation, I taught Spanish, and I went through a whole half-hour class and got things going beside me. And I said, now, is there anything else anybody would like to know besides dirty words? Because that comes in the third or fourth class. And the girl raised her hand and she said, sir, how do you sign your zippers out? So I always check before I finally realized after my first year at Shady Trails that I did not anymore have aspirations to become a concert pianist. And after 4 years as a counselor at this great place, I knew I was not going to become a concert pianist, but a speech language pathologist, which I have been for 49 years, and I know what all the Shady Trails. And I thank Dr. Clancy, I thank Dr. Prinz, and Mr. Fields for carrying on the tradition of excellence in speech pathology. My only regret is that the young kids and young adults do not have the Shady Trails with home.
I was at U of M in 1965-6, and that summer of '66 I was here as a therapist the day that I had met Dave at school, PMK. My husband and I have been sailing in Florida since about 1985 to 2010, and good that he is the captain and I am not. I hopefully brought down the sails and put them up correctly. We had a lot of great sailing times, beautiful sunsets and sunrises, and I think the most scary time I ever remember was the fog rolling in on us as we approached the marina. We couldn't have been more than 50 feet, maybe, but we were just totally engulfed in the fog, so we couldn't see anything. We did get in safely, and as I said, he's the captain, and should have been that day. We had a great time otherwise, but that was very, very scary with the fog rolling in.
I'm from near Saginaw, Michigan. I'm a speech and language pathologist. I was a camper here in '63 and '64, and then on the camp staff in '69 through '73. My wife and I were married in the fall, I better get this right, in the fall of '71, and so we were about 2 years a married couple in '72 and '3, but she was finishing her undergraduate at Central and only was able to come up on weekends, I think, and so Tim and Dave and I lived up on the hill together, bachelor's quarters, and had a really good time, and we kind of made room for Candy when she came up on the weekend, and
not in the same cabin with her.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. That was the other. But we just had a great time, Tim, Dave, and I up there on the hill. And I guess as long as I just got the floor, some of the traditions I remember are the marine incineration, fire on the water, and the earlobe disease. Do we still what is that stuff? Lobitis or whatever. And speech contacts such as
I remember somebody having me look for chamber pots. And we get them for Frankenmuth or, not Frankenmuth, Frankfurt or Charlotte, and I'm not having any idea what a chamber pot was, but you had to go store to store and ask for a chamber pot. Another thing, after having been a camper my freshman and sophomore years after high school, I really thought when I was up here for those 8 weeks that the world closed at bedtime. And then it opened up again at breakfast. And then when I was on the camp staff.
I was a counselor with Bob Morris in 1970 and 71 in the Mariners camp. Every morning we would have counselors meeting. And there's the man right there, Mr. Levy, would always get these meetings going. T. Carter was in charge with Ash Bishop. I believe Ash Bishop was the AD, but Tim seemed to run the show for me, I thought. You know, he was the one who gave us our running orders for the day of what we were going to be doing with the kids. And we'd break up into 2 groups. There'd be the, what we call more athletic students and the lesser skilled students. So, and we divided. Bob would take one group and I'd take another. What I thought was so amazing about this, along with the speech therapy and all the things that they did in that parameters, what we did, I think, really built up the egos of the kids and their self-esteem just by doing athletics together. They felt that they weren't on the school playground anymore with all their peers in the public schools or private schools. They were here with peers of their own, and they could succeed in doing softball or whatever sport it is we were doing. And they felt much better about themselves. I had just retired, which would have been in the fall of 2011, and then my wife, she had retired in June of 2012, and what we did, we got on a cargo freighter in Houston, Texas, and we were gone for 5 months. And we traveled around the world. And so we stopped at about 25 ports. When we got on the freighter, there were basically 4 people on the freighter. There were 2 guys from Australia, one from Rio de Janeiro, and one from New Zealand. They got off in Europe. We continued on the freighter for the last 3 months of the journey and traveled down to Thailand, into China, into Japan, and then, as I say, upwards back to Houston. It took 5 months. You really learn a lot on one of those freighters, and you can see why the deficit is so great here in America, on the trade deficit. When we traveled across on the Pacific, it took us 21 days. We passed 1 ship in 21 days, and we had $63 million worth of cargo on the ship. Of the $63 million of cargo, $55 million of it was steel. Steel from China. And when we were going into Shanghai, I thought, saying to the captain at the time, I said, geez, you know, I said that there's a lot of fog here. And he said, you know, bud, he said, that isn't fog, that's smog. He said, that's why all this steel is being shipped from China over into the U.S. He said there are basically 2 reasons. One, because of the EPA. Over in China, there's no EPA, believe me. And number 2, he said, because of the unions. And he said, but it was really something. We transported, in other words, we picked up a couple of the private yachts that had been built in the Netherlands. One was about 110 foot long. It was valued at about $45 million. We dropped that off in Shanghai. They just lowered it in the water. In other words, off it goes. So it was really a learning experience, and so that's what, I guess that's what I was supposed to talk about. Yeah, right.
I think I've known about Shady Trails since I was a student at the University of Wisconsin in the 60s. Lois Nelson was my instructor. She went to the university and studied under Van Riper. She herself was a very serious stutterer growing up and talked about resources for people who stutter. And she told us about Shady Trails. So I knew the name Shady Trails for a long time. When my husband was a pastor in Muskegon, Michigan, I was a clinician in Whitehall. And there was a little girl, her name was Shane, and she had a cleft palate. And I remembered about Shady Trails and looked into whether or not that would be appropriate for her to go in the summer. So gave all the information to her parents. We moved shortly after I had given them that, so I don't know if she ever came here. I'd never been at Shady Trails until 2 years ago, and met a lot of absolutely wonderful people. But before I came here, I knew a couple of wonderful people, Bernie and also Russ Hicks. They are members of the National Stuttering Association. I'm also, and I had started a website in 1994, before there was the World Wide Web. It was a Gopher site. And also did some online conferences. And I asked Bernie and Russ, who had gone to Shady Trails, to write an article for an online conference about their camp experience. It's on the internet, it's still there. And the love of this camp was so obvious in what they wrote that I said, why don't we start a website for Shady Trails to keep those memories alive? And I guess that's how that all started.
My name is Mike Drumheller. I was a camper here in '66 in the U Club. Then I came back for 3 years, 69, 70, 71 as a counselor. I was in Bruce, in Meredith cabin, youth cabin. One tradition that was never brought up was the bus.
What?
The bus. The camp bus. One of the years that I was a counselor, I was elected to get a chauffeur's license. I never drove anything bigger than a Volkswagen at that time. And Tim had a few of us, we had to get the license, and so we had to go out and get it, check pass, no problem. Then we had to drive this humongous Michigan bus, snub-nosed bus that Tim brought up here that hardly made it. I think it about blew up on the way up that year. And he said, you gotta watch the temperature gauge because it does overheat. But that wasn't my problem. There was a tradition where we would take some of the older kids down to Traverse to see a play. We would get in the bus and way back about 10:30, 10 o'clock. Coming back up, 22. Now, you know the way it looks now. There's houses everywhere. There wasn't houses. There was just all woods. So I decided to start here. There was a little moon out, and I decided to press on the button for the bright lights. When I did, every single light in the bus went off, including the headlights. Oh, boy. Nothing worked. What am I going to do? I'm going to run into somebody in this bus. Finally, they came on. I said, leave it alone. I got back to camp. Long story short, I told the guys, do not press that button.
Brights or no brights?
Brights or no brights? No.
Was that 1970 perchance? Because you talked about the overheating.
Yeah, probably.
Because that's the year I actually blew up the bus.
You the
I was the driver. We had gone on a day trip with the group to Traverse City, and then we were going to visit Gwen Frostic's, which was west of there, and Diana was actually on the bus with me, and we spent a little too much time with the kids in Traverse City, and she said, Bob, we gotta get there because that place is gonna close. So here I am, 21 years old, with my chauffeur's license, driving this bus, but there had been a problem. From day one, the temperature gauge would go to hot, and Tim had to check out. The mechanic in town said, "Oh, don't worry about it." Well, it was overheating. So we actually were driving down the road. We just got past Interlochen, I think, and lo and behold, somebody flagged us down. "Sir, your back is on fire. So we pulled over, got that out, and then Diana had the job of calling the field and telling him that the bus had blown up or caught fire. And maybe you could add to that. I'm glad I wasn't the one who had to make the call.
Diana called me and said, "Hi, how are you?" I said, "I'm fine. How are you?" He said, "Well, I'm fine, and let me start out by telling you everyone is fine." Everyone is just fine. And I said, "Okay." And she said, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "No." She said, "Why don't you?" I did. I'll say it again, everyone is fine. We're here at the Cherry Hut, and the kids are all fine. Bus is also on fire. But I just want you to know that we're all fine.
I had the privilege of working under 3 directors, each wonderful, each supportive, each wanting me to do the best job I could with the graduate students, to make every kid's experience here wonderful. So I started off with Dr. Prinz, as Tim would say, old Silver Hills, who would just walk around the camp and very stoic and be supportive. Dave was my next director, and I finished off my career here at Shady Trails with Dave Daly. So I had a wonderful experience with, first of all, the directors. I had the privilege of being a graduate student and then a major in the Roost. And it was in the Roost. And when I think about all the things we did, going down Pearson Park in those buses and having to go out for Christmas Cove, I don't remember T, which has the steeper slope. Taking the kids to Sweeping Bear, sand dunes, having to have the deaf kids take out their hearing aids and give them to us because the sand is all in their ears. And the speech deck was like, oh my gosh, what a big hill. And the kids go up so far and they were rolling down. It was just such an interesting way of helping kids. And every year I learned so much more from the kids. So to all of us, no matter what part we played, whether you press on speakers, no matter what you did here, you were here and you were part of a great, great nurturing and growing, whether you were a camper or a staff member, it didn't matter who you were. And the directors, just like Dave said in his commentary, had such a responsibility, not only for the children, but we were a teaching tool. We had these graduate students we were supervising and teaching, and important people, all these important people that I was studying, their books came to Camp Shady Trails and put on a Shady Trails t-shirt. To see Van Riper in shorts and a t-shirt about blew my mind, you know, and all of these people. So it was a real privilege, and it continues to be a privilege today. And I think it's affected everybody's life.
I was a camper here in '73. I was 16, I turned 17 in July. We had a birthday, it was cool. And then I was a counselor here. Then it affected me. I came back as a counselor in 76 and 7. I worked for Dave. I was scared to death to come here. And I was met at the airport because there was another kid from Cleveland Heights who we flew in together. And his name was Adam Polster. I don't know if you remember Adam. He was a cerebral palsy kid. He was taller than me. And I'm like, I didn't know what I was getting into. And we got on the plane, and Ron Dougal met us at the airport. And I had forgotten that, but I went through some letters that my mom had saved that I wrote back to home. She had them all stacked up and the same in order. And I was reading them before I came up here, and I couldn't believe it. And I had this young man, Ron Dougal, pick me up at the airport. So, I mean, it's from the very beginning till I left. I mean, it was a life-changing experience.
It's been 52 years since I last stood here to speak in this dining hall. The round robin then faced a slightly younger audience with a few including. My first year was 55, I was here through 60, skipped 61, and here in 62. I do remember one particular conversation that I was eavesdropping upon, where two of the women speech therapists, presumably associates because I don't remember anything else, were talking about how one of the guys in the U Club was telling them what it would be like to be married to a speech therapist. And how it would be just wonderful to, hi honey, how you doing? I had a great day. Did you blend today? And you were speaking to your boss. Did you cancel? And I don't remember the entire gist of it, other than that, but they just thought it was hysterical. That's somebody that you cover telling them that it would just be wonderful to be married to somebody who would remind them to relax before going into that big conference. But as far as personal experiences, they were all very professional, as far as I remember. I remember some of them even pausing slightly as one camper would hurriedly be grooming off the front stoop before they walked in. You all remember room inspections, right? Did you all have a 5-point scale? Yeah, well, if you got less than a 4, it was really bad. And tried very hard to give a 5. And sometimes the counselors were a little sympathetic. A lot of times, as you remember, they weren't. So the rooms were always extremely clean when we were here. Remember, nothing on the walls. You can't post anything on the walls. You remember that? God, I see a lot of blank stares out there. So I think, particularly when I came back 2 years ago to see this for the first time in 40 years, I was amazed at how intact it was and how much it went with my memories, even with the added buildings. I'm sure other people have different memories of the staff. Those were my memories, at least a few.
Tell what you wound up doing, Jim, after you left your career. That's kind of neat.
Oh, well, I went into communicative disorders. Things now called what, communication sciences disorders. I could never keep up with what we were called. 5 years as a speech therapist in the public schools, graduate degree, 20 years as an audiologist in private practice. And that was enough. I going up in communicative disorders, and when the opportunity came that I could retire, I took it.
And the legend of Indian Joe, a misfit from the Schwabi town, who was tossed out of his tribe, resettled on Gull Island and would visit camp one night during the season, not with a noble cause. That was already established. We thought maybe we should create another creature, or not creature, but legend. So was born the great Muckfoot, a prehistoric creature who was frozen in the depths of Grand Traverse Bay for millions of years. Suddenly became unfrozen, rose to the surface, and was wreaking havoc in the area. So we thought we would roll this out on the junior division. So for one night's entertainment, got the whole junior division, Park Avenue, Rosemary, down on the beach. They were all sitting down facing the shore with instructions to listen to the story, because this was the first time this had been told at camp. And so we started, the story was started, and lo and behold, out from Sunrise Landing, in a fish net or a badnet net, or some kind of net, came the great Muckfoot. And as the story progressed, then he came up to the camp. He got even with the gathering and started in a predetermined point in the story. The storyteller would pause with a quizzical look on his face and look out at the bay. And of course, when he did that, everybody looked out at the bay, and here comes the great Muckfoot. Little did we know the pandemonium that would cause, not only among the campers, but the staff. The stampede out to the roost literally became every man, woman, and child for themselves. Very quickly, the only people left on the beach were the storyteller and the great Muckfoot. It took quite a while to get the junior division settled down and introduced to the great Muckfoot, who was one of their counselors. And I would have bet the farm that the great Muckfoot that summer, he only did it the one summer, was Bud Oxley. And I emailed Bud, I remember being the great Muckfoot. And he said, sorry, I don't remember that. Well, if you're the great Muckfoot, you're not going to forget that.
I'm 68, Carter. As I say, you're going to be senior moments like that.
So anyway, I was so excited to be able to introduce the next speaker as the great Muckfoot, since he's already spoken, and he wasn't the great Muckfoot anyway. I shall shut up and sit down.
This is the second time I've been at Shady Trails since 1980, and I couldn't come back. I came back last year and stood at the street and just cried and cried and cried. This place meant so much, and heard about it being closing and so forth. And, when I came in '73, David was here, Tim was here, Diana was here, and you couldn't have asked, I didn't know anything about camping. I took this job thinking I was going to be an assistant professor at the University of Michigan, and oh, you also directed a camp. Anyway, it turned out okay, but I want to make a point. I think most assistant and associate professors who teach a class in stuttering, one of the assignments is to ask the students, non-stutterers, the undergraduates or graduate students, to go out and fake or pretend to get the feeling in public of what it would be like to stutter. And I guess as a guy who's 74 and been teaching for a long time, I don't think half the students ever did it. They were too afraid. I don't think our students that then went on and worked with stutterers and other things, I don't think they ever did that. But the people that came to Shady Trails, the staff, the students, and the campers were all equal in a way. They were desensitized. And there's an old saying, the client doesn't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And boy, if you work with somebody who was trained at Shady Trails, they really cared. So when people would call me and say, we've got an application from this person, and they said they worked with you a little bit, do you think they're a good person to hire? And I think back, God, they were at Shady Trails in '76 or '70. I always recommended they get hired in it because people up here care. It's a great place, and I'm really glad I came back.
This is a list of deceased Shady Trails. Jeff Adamczak, camper, staff. Thomas A. Brenner, camper. Grace M. Clancy, camp mother. Ruth M. Curtis, staff. Darlene Del Russo, staff. Ron Dougal, staff. Bill Hill, camper, staff. Larry Fleece, staff. Ruthie Fleece, staff. Camp cook. Donald Sandy Gordon, camper. Irv Midas, camper, staff. Nancy Midas, staff. Jerry Mitchell, camper. Stuart Rhodes, camper. Kirkland Teeple, camper. John N. Clancy, founder, director emeritus.
We want to recognize the significant efforts of Judy Custer for her continuing efforts as a great friend of Shady Trails, campers and staff. Her outstanding contributions developing camp history, internet connections, and her participation in both reunions have been outstanding. Thank you. We want to recognize the efforts of Tom Custer for his continuing efforts as a great friend of Shady Trails, campers and staff, and his interviews with former campers and her participation in both reunions have been outstanding. Thank you very much. Thank you. We want to recognize Bud Oxley for his participation today and for the weekend. Thank you. And you know, Lance has done a great job at the piano, and we want to recognize his outstanding efforts today. Now, I did not realize that Mike was bringing his guitar and was going to do all this. And I'll put it in the mail. I worked with 3 other great planners, okay, and I told you that they had been campers and on staff. And Tim Carter, his passion and his energy and leadership has led to this reunion. Tim, would you like to come up? Robert Voorhees. Where are you, Bob? Thank you. Okay, here's a little different one. Diana Carter. Now, she wasn't on a planning team, but she kept talking to this guy. You know, I want to do this. And she's really responsible for these. So her passion for Shady Trails, her production of the name tags, and her work with the planning team. So thank you very much. And Dave Field. Now, one of the things we did, we met 8 times. 7 of those were at Metzger's restaurant in Ann Arbor. I drive over to Ann Arbor because the 3 of them were pretty close. But you know, it's been great. I've never worked with a director before, but it's been good. Yeah.
Bob has alluded to the first reunion would never have happened without Howard and Jim. The second reunion would never have happened without this man. So in our appreciation, it's a little different.
Thank you. Sure.
This says Bob Chrisman, Chairman Extraordinaire, Shady Trails Reunion 2014.
Hi, my name's David Field. I was on the camp staff from 1964 to 1973. I was an intern in the Neophytes in '64. I was a major in the Wolverines and the Cave after that. In 1969, I was the assistant director, and then in 1970, I became the director till I left in '73. So, I'm supposed to tell stories. I have a million of them. It's just a matter of picking which one is the best one to tell. I think I'll retell one that most of you may already know. It's the story of the mummy. Every night at 10 o'clock, the staff would gather in the lodge to unwind, have staff meetings, and have a snack, and also just kind of schmooze with each other. It happened to be a night that we had shown a movie, and it was a horror movie, and we got to talking about which movies were our favorite horror movies and which ones scared us the most. And I said, the one that scared me the most, the monster that scared me the most, was the Mummy. So we went ahead and talked, and it was getting late, and I decided I needed to go up on the hill where my wife and my children were living. Well, Mike Clark and Carol Lee Allen said that they wanted to go for a walk, so they would walk me up the hill. Tim Carter and Woody Fox had been sitting at the table talking with us, and they had disappeared sometime before I left. So we walked, Carol Lee and Mike and I walked across the athletic field and up a very, very steep hill at the end of the athletic field. And it was very, very dark, as it always is at night at Shady Trails, and I had a flashlight. And as I was coming to the top of the hill, a light went on from behind the tree, and there at the top was the Mummy. I did a complete backflip, landed on top of Carol Lee, who landed up on top of Mike. Carol Lee started choking me, and I was lying in the dirt groveling like a child going, I was scared to death. Then everybody just started laughing. Carolee was convinced that I knew all about it and that I had done this on purpose to scare her, and I tried to assure her that that was not the case. But that's probably my favorite off-camp story. It had nothing to do with the camp program. It was just part of what the campers and staff did to have fun with each other.
My name is Woody Fox. I was here from 1966 through 1969. I was there as a counselor for the first 2 years in the Roost and the last 2 years in the Cave. The biggest adventure I ever had was when I was named the Midnight Hurdler. One night, some girls wanted to know how I was a hurdler at the University of Michigan. So I was jumping over the benches out in the middle of the field in the midnight. And Ash Bishop came running up and caught me doing it. So that was how the name the Midnight Hurdler came around. The one year I was waterfront director, we taught the kids life-saving, and I certified 2 or 3 of them so they could go back and become lifeguards if they wanted to. But we did athletic things. I think the pull-up bar is still out there where we tested the kids. We had like physical fitness tests that we gave the kids at the beginning and the end. The kids with the less athletic ability had speech in the mornings because they were stronger at that time to be able to do their speech. And the kids who had better physical abilities could take the physical activities first because they could still do their speech in the afternoons. Because I taught elementary phys ed for 40 years. And the first 3 years of my college career were coming up here. 66, 67, 68. And then the last year I was a teacher in 69, I came back up for 1 more year. But I really think the camp helped me as a teacher know how to work with kids, and I was always a very good adaptive PE teacher, especially with the younger kids. And I think working up here helped me with that immensely.
My name's Diana Morgan Carter. And when I was here at Camp Shady Trails, I was Miss Morgan. And I came in 1968 and left in 1974. Not that I stayed here all winter, because I was a public school speech and language pathologist. Well, I ended up in the Park Avenue with the little ones, which was, of course, my favorite job, even though I worked in the elementary, in the middle school, and the high school. And it was just a blast. We had wonderful counselors and wonderful speech therapists. And it's from the Park Avenue that I moved into the Roost as a major for 2 years. And from there, I moved to the clinical coordinator of the junior division. But I had the privilege of working under 3 wonderful directors, Dr. Prinz, Dave Field, and Dr. Daly. What a blessing they were to us, giving us all that support. The speech program was very interesting to me because we had all sorts of children here. Mainly, they were, of course, they were all boys, but they had some severe problems, and Shady Trails taught me many lessons, but one of them was to treasure each day. Stutterers, the best. We had lots of them. Cleft palate, our students who were deaf. It was a wonderful experience. Multiple articulation problems. I can remember one student I had when I was in the Roost, and he came and he was here for 3 days, and he wore the shirt that he had from home. So finally I took him aside and said, Andy, you know, your parents have spent all this money and love you so much that they sent you here to Shady Trails to work on your speech, but you have to change your shirt. Well, the next day, he had on his camp shirt, and it was glorious from then on. Not only did we have wonderful speech victories and out trips and silly mifflers, and they would dress the kids up. It didn't matter whether they could hear, whether they could move with cerebral palsy, whatever. We found a position for them in the miffler. And what happens was that they had a whole change of their personality. And let's give credit to the counselors. My counselors were the backbone. They had the kids fed, they had the kids ready, and they taught them something that we couldn't, and that's how to participate in sports and to find that oneness with their body, with their spirit, with their emotions. get along with all kinds of kids. And we speech therapists took care of working with their speech. I had a wonderful time here at Shady Trails. I appreciated all the lessons that I learned, and every child taught me something, and hopefully I helped to teach them something as well. Kudos to the directors, to this beautiful facility, and especially to Dr. and Mrs. Clancy, who gave of themselves, their heart, their soul, and their money to create this wonderful environment. And you know what? If you came to Shady Trails, you left a better person and a changed person, and your heart and speech were changed.
My name is Doug Henning. I live in Jacksonville, Florida. I came to Shady Trails in 1967 and 68 in the Wolverine cabin. At the time I came to Shady Trails, I was living in Garden City, New York. I came to Shady Trails because my older brother Rick attended Shady Trails in 1963 and 64, was best friends with Bud Oxley, who ended up being my camp counselor in 1968. I came here with some, for the reasons that, like many of others, because my speech was, I had a bad stutter, but I came here because Rick had come, and Rick brought me my first summer to the camp. I was thrown into this pot, 1,000 miles almost away from home, and it wasn't like today where you were really away, and I felt away. But the enthusiasm of the camp, which brought me here, which worked on, particularly for me, was the attentions I would get as a stutterer. The relaxation therapies and things of that nature, the learning how to get through the blocks through bouncing and other methodologies like that worked for me, and provided me a tool so that if I had to, I emerged speaking a lot better. But I still wasn't perfect after that first summer, so we came back for a second summer. This time I came by myself, flying from New York to Traverse City. It was the first time, I think, that I ever flew by myself anywhere. Was when I was, but I was, 15 years old at that point, just finishing 9th grade, and I was getting ready to go away to boarding school in 10th grade. So, one of the things I wanted to be sure of is that when I went away to school, that I wouldn't stand out with my speech. And so, I wasn't, I still had stuttering issues, but less severe than after I was here for the first summer. So the second summer I arrived, and I was fluent the whole summer. I never had issues that had to force me to go through the therapy, to force a fake, because I wasn't blocking. I'd get up and do the round robins and the announcements and things like that without any issues, and it was a wonderful experience for me to be fluent the whole summer. I liked the singing. I liked to sing anyway, but singing certainly provided me the tools to know I could talk for a long time without stuttering. I'll always remember the memories of the activities. The trips to Sleeping Bear, Frankfurt, going out of here, learning how to eat cherries. I liked cherries before. After 2 summers here, I love cherries. I drink cherry Diet Coke today. It's in my cherry. My kids know this. If they want to get Dad a dessert, now I'm not supposed to eat too many desserts anymore, but when they do, it's cherry pie for Dad. Because that's where this is where I learned about it, and I've really enjoyed this weekend. Being with one of my cabin mates a little bit, and certainly with Bud, who's who amazed me with his passion for my brother. I heard about Bud Oxley, and then I obviously was with him for a summer. But the closeness that he never expressed to me that summer how close he felt to my brother at the time. Maybe that's not something you talk about with a 15-year-old too much. But now that we're in our 60s, we can talk about that stuff. My brother Rick, I called him this morning and told him I just had breakfast with Bud Oxley, and he was amazed. And I said, I wish he had told me he was going on. And I said, well, I probably couldn't have come anyway, but you know, maybe if we have another one, maybe Rick will show up, you know, if we have another one of these. I don't think he's ever made it back here either. I mean, this was my first visit here this weekend since 1968. And, you know, so it was a wonderful experience. Certainly, like a lot of the fellows we heard about this weekend, you know, it did certainly change my life and made it me a better person. Didn't remove stuttering forever for me, and it never does. But I get up every once a month and read the lessons out of the Bible and talk in front of my church. And people say, "Doug, you're a wonderful speaker. We wish you would do it every Sunday." I said, "Well, don't want to do it every Sunday." So that's my story.
My name is David Daly. I first came to the camp in 1973. I came as the director, having never had any camp experience before. But some of the staff who came back year after year were here to guide me and help me learn many of the traditions and the rationale behind the camp. As a child who stuttered, I attended a university summer clinic, lived in a college dormitory for 5 weeks, but never got a real feeling of compassion or empathy from the undergraduate students that were working with me. And I left that 5-week experience kind of discouraged. Then when I came to Shady Trails, and I was here from 73 to 79 as the director, I learned that every staff member, from the person that worked in the kitchen to the secretaries to the counselors, the graduate students, and the staff, no matter if they'd been here 1 year or 10 years, everyone had to give a short speech. Everyone had to participate in a play. And everyone got the empathy or the understanding of the fear or the anxiety that people who stutter often have. And that was one of the strengths of the camp, which has stuck with me all of these years. People that worked at this camp came because they loved the philosophy and they loved the kids. And I was impressed with the many adults who came back to visit the camp during the camp season and sat and had lunch with us and then gave little talks to the campers. One afternoon I had a phone call, and a guy asked to talk to the director, and I told him I was, and he said, "Look out the window." And I did, and there was a beautiful big yacht out there. And he said, "I'm from Chicago, and I was a camper here 20-some years ago. I'd like to have you come to Northport to pick me up. I don't have a car. I'll park my boat in Northport." And we went and got him, and he came and had lunch with us. And then he asked if he could make an announcement, and he stood up, and he gave one of the best motivational speeches I've ever heard. He talked about how he was here for 2 summers, what a severe stutterer he was, how Shady Trails helped him, and he became the president of a company, and reminded the campers that every minute, every hour, and every day that we're here to work as hard as they could, because good things happen at Shady Trails. As the director and one that was trying to manage the budget, I was surprised but pleased when just before he left, he came in the office and gave me a check for $10,000 for scholarships for the campers. So some people with means have helped in many ways, and other people have just come up and given of their time. Shady Trails is a very, very special place. I feel privileged to have worked here, made some good friends here. I think we've helped thousands. Primarily my interest was stuttering, but we had so many different youngsters here from 8 to 21 with cerebral palsy, cleft palate, severe language and articulation problems, severe hearing disorders. Shady Trails is truly a magic place, and I'm very proud to be part of it and proud to be back at this 2014 reunion. Thank you very much.